Have you ever wondered why a small comment, a passing glance, or a familiar situation can cause your entire day to fall off track? You are not weak. You do not lack willpower. Many adults carry this kind of quiet exhaustion within them. They work hard, they try to live kindly, yet they often regret reactions that happen too quickly, too unconsciously, as if something inside made the decision for them. I have met many people like this throughout my life. People who are intelligent, capable, and kind-hearted, yet find themselves carried away by their own emotions. And I want you to know an important truth. There is nothing wrong with you. What is happening is simply that your mind is running on an old program formed long before you were aware of it. Deep within you, beyond all the noise of the world, there exists a quiet, gentle, and powerful intelligence. It does not ask you to fight your emotions, nor does it require you to become cold or numb. It waits for you to recognize that emotions are not commanders, but signals. And signals are meant to be listened to with clarity, not given full control. I want to be clear with you about this. The journey you are listening to is not meant to teach you how to suppress your emotions, nor to turn you into a rigid person. This is an invitation to awaken to the power that lives in a very small moment. The moment between what happens and how you respond. It is within this moment that your inner authority begins to speak. Your subconscious mind is a loyal servant. It does not argue. It does not analyze. It simply repeats what you have taught it through your habitual reactions. When you respond in fear, it learns to protect you through fear. When you respond in anger, it believes anger is a way to survive. And then it repeats this pattern again and again until you believe it is who you truly are. But you were not born to live inside that loop. You were born to live with choice. Right now, simply by listening and being present, you have already begun to write a new chapter in your mind. There is no need to force, no need to struggle, only to understand and allow a new way of seeing to be planted within you. Allow me to walk with you on this journey. We will not move fast. We will move deep, and each small moment of awareness you gain will gradually open the door to a life that is more peaceful, more clear, and more free from within. Perhaps more than once in your life, you have told yourself that next time you will be different. Next time you will stay calmer. Next time you will not say those words. Next time you will not let emotions carry you too far. But when the familiar situation appears again, everything unfolds almost the same. You react before you have time to think, and right after that, a very familiar feeling arrives. It is not exactly anger and not exactly sadness. It is a quiet regret that sinks in very deeply. I want you to pause here for a moment, not to blame yourself, just to look honestly at this very human truth. Many people do not suffer because of their circumstances. They suffer because of how they react to their circumstances. A careless sentence in a meeting, a short message from someone close, a look that is not what you hoped for. These very small things can shake an entire day or even a relationship simply because the reaction happens too fast. You may have lost confidence because of one piece of feedback. You may have stepped back from an opportunity because anxiety suddenly rose. You may have said words that hurt the person you love most and carried regret long after. And the most painful part is not what happened, but the question that keeps repeating in your mind. Why am I like this? Why can I not control myself? I want to tell you this with complete sincerity. The problem is not that you lack character strength or willpower. The problem is that you were programmed to react this way a long time ago. Your subconscious learns through repetition. It remembers how you react in stress, in fear, in hurt. And because it is a loyal servant, it keeps recreating those reactions whether you want it to or not. Each time you react from the old habit, the subconscious understands that this is safe. This is familiar. This is survival. So it protects you through that reaction, even when it no longer fits the person you want to be today. This is why many adults feel like they are living in a loop. They want to change, yet they react the same way. The cost of this loop is quiet but real. It slowly takes away your peace. It makes you doubt yourself. It makes you feel as if you always arrive after your emotions, as if life is being controlled by something inside that you cannot reach. And when this repeats long enough, you begin to believe this is who you truly are. But that is not the truth. Who you truly are is not your impulsive reactions. Who you truly are lives in your ability to choose, in the very small moment before you speak, before you act, before you decide. That moment has simply been forgotten for too long, until you forgot it even existed. I have seen many people change their lives, not by forcing themselves to be stronger, but by learning to pause for one beat. Just one short beat. Enough to not be swept away. Enough to give the quiet inner wisdom a chance to speak. And when that happens, something very gentle begins to appear. You no longer see yourself as a victim of your emotions. You begin to see yourself as the observer. When you can observe your emotions, you are no longer completely controlled by them. You may still feel anger, but you do not have to speak hurtful words. You may still feel fear, but you do not have to run away. You may still feel sadness, but you do not have to close your heart. This is not suppression. This is inner maturity. I want to ask you something very gently now. Do you notice a pattern of reaction in your life that keeps repeating? One that often leaves you with regret afterward. If you are listening and see yourself in these words, simply recognizing it is already a very important step. Thank you for being honest enough with yourself to stay with this question. You do not need to fix everything today. The subconscious does not change through force. It changes through new repetition, through moments when you choose differently, even just a little. And each time you do not react from the old habit, you plant a new seed. A seed of peace. A seed of inner freedom. Thank you for your presence in this moment. The fact that you are listening and reflecting already shows that something real is alive within you. A desire to live differently, to live with more awareness, to live without being pulled by emotions as before. And I want you to know you are not walking this journey alone. There is a very quiet rule that governs almost your entire inner life. The subconscious does not distinguish right from wrong or good from bad. It only remembers what is repeated often enough with strong enough emotion. Then it accepts that as truth. This is why many people clearly know their reactions are not wise, yet continue to react the same way. Not because they do not understand, but because their subconscious has learned a different lesson. Your subconscious is like fertile soil. Whatever seed you plant it will nourish and help it grow. When you react in fear again and again, the subconscious learns that fear is necessary for survival. When you react in anger, it believes anger is self-protection. When you react in anxiety, it learns that the world is not a safe place. Then it simply does its job. It keeps producing similar reactions to protect you, even when that protection leaves you exhausted and hurt. The important thing is that you never intentionally taught the subconscious these lessons. Many beliefs and reactions were formed when you were very young. You may have grown up in an environment where strong emotions were normal. You may have needed to react quickly to be heard to avoid being hurt or to not be abandoned. Your subconscious learned very fast during those years, and it is still working from old data even though your current circumstances are very different. You need to understand this so you can stop blaming yourself. When you react unconsciously, it is not a moral failure. It is a sign that the subconscious is running an old program. And the good news is that any program can be updated if you know how. Not through resistance, but through understanding and new repetition. The subconscious responds most strongly to images and feelings. It does not learn through long reasoning. It learns through experience. Each time you pause before reacting, even for a very small moment, you create a new experience for the subconscious. You are showing it that there is another option, that safety does not always require immediate reaction, that peace can also be a survival state. Many people try to control emotions by telling themselves, do not be angry, do not worry, do not be afraid. But the subconscious does not hear negative commands. It only hears what you are actually feeling. If tension is still inside, those words have little effect. What the subconscious needs instead is a new feeling, even a gentle one. The feeling of pausing, the feeling of not being swept away, the feeling that you are still okay even without reacting. When you allow an emotion to arise without immediately acting on it, you separate two things that have been mixed together for many years. Emotion is a signal. Reaction is a choice. Before they happened almost at the same time, so you believed they were one. But when you begin to observe, you will see there is space between them. That space is where the subconscious can learn something new. I have witnessed many people change not through tense effort, but through very gentle repetition. Each time they chose silence instead of harsh reaction. Each time they chose to breathe instead of replying immediately. Each time they chose to step away instead of arguing. These small choices, when repeated enough, begin to leave an imprint in the subconscious. Then one day a new reaction appears more naturally, more softly, as if it had always been there. You need patience with this process. The subconscious does not change overnight, but it changes faithfully when guided correctly. You are not fixing a broken person. You are helping a loyal system learn a new way of operating, one that fits who you are today. Remember that each time you do not react the old way, even while emotions are still present, you are planting a very important seed. The seed of inner freedom, the seed of choice. And these seeds, when watered with attention and patience, will grow into a new habit, a new way of living. You do not need to wait until you are perfect to begin. The subconscious does not ask for perfection. It only asks for repetition. And every moment you become aware, you are already teaching it something very different. That you are no longer someone carried away by emotion. You are becoming the one who leads your own inner world. Your body and mind are not separate the way many people think. They are one unified system, constantly responding to each other moment by moment. When a thought appears in your mind, the body listens immediately. When a belief is activated, your entire inner system reacts as if that belief were absolute truth. This is why sometimes, before you understand what is happening, your heart is already beating faster, your chest feels heavy, and your breath becomes short. I want you to understand something very important. Your body is not working against you. It is trying to protect you in the way it has been taught. If in the past reacting quickly helped you avoid being hurt, avoid being overpowered, or avoid being abandoned, then your body stored that response as a survival strategy. And it continues to use that strategy until you show it another path. Many people believe their emotions come from the outside, from other people's words, from the actions of circumstances. But the deeper truth is that emotions arise from what you believe about what is happening. Two people can stand in the same situation, hear the same sentence, and react completely differently. The difference is not in the event, but in the belief operating inside each person. When you believe you are being insulted, your body reacts as if it is under attack. When you believe you are about to fail, your body reacts as if danger is near. When you believe you are not respected, your entire inner system tightens to defend itself. And then you react, not because you want to hurt anyone, but because you believe you must protect yourself. The subconscious does not analyze context. It does not question whether a belief is still appropriate. It simply responds faithfully to what you believe is true. And because of that, if you want to change how you react, you cannot focus only on outer behavior. You need to gently go deeper to where beliefs are formed and maintained. Many people try to fix themselves through self-blame. They tell themselves they are too reactive, too sensitive, too weak. But each time you judge yourself this way, your body senses another threat, and it reacts again. You unintentionally strengthen the very loop you want to escape. The path of healing does not begin with removing emotions. It begins with understanding. When you understand that every reaction is an attempt to protect you, you start to see yourself differently. Not as someone who failed at control, but as someone who learned how to survive in certain conditions. And now you are learning a new way to survive, one that fits your present life. I have seen many people change deeply through a small shift in awareness. Instead of asking, "Why am I reacting like this?" they begin to ask, "What inside me feels unsafe right now?" This question does not push you into self-blame. It opens listening. And when you listen, your body begins to relax, because at last it is being understood. When you allow yourself to pause and recognize the belief triggering the emotion, you begin to create a new relationship with yourself. You no longer fight emotions. You dialogue with them. You may gently say inside that you feel threatened, but you are safe. You feel hurt, but you do not need to react immediately. These very simple messages, when repeated slowly, begin to be absorbed by the subconscious. The subconscious learns through experiences of safety. Each time you move through a tense situation while staying present, you give your body new evidence. Evidence that strong reaction is not always required to survive. Evidence that calm can also be a form of protection. And when enough of this evidence accumulates, it begins to change how your inner system operates. You do not need to believe everything I am saying right away. You only need to observe. Observe what happens in your body when you believe you are being judged. Observe what happens when you believe you are respected. You will notice the body responds very differently. And from this observation, a new kind of wisdom begins to form. Not the wisdom of books, but a living wisdom born from your own direct experience. Remember that you do not need to rush. Deep beliefs are not formed in one day, and they do not dissolve in one day. But each time you recognize the connection between belief, emotion, and reaction, you take an important step toward inner freedom. You are teaching your body that the present is different from the past, that you are older, safer, and have more choices than before. And when your body begins to believe this, you will notice a change that is very gentle, yet very deep. You still feel emotions, but they no longer pull you the way they once did. You begin to stand more firmly within yourself, not because you control better, but because you understand yourself more deeply. I want to share something I have learned after many years of observing people, observing myself, and observing how the mind works in silence. Very rarely does a life change direction because of one big event. Most real change begins in very small moments. Moments so small they are often overlooked. And the most important moment of all is the very first second when an emotion begins to rise. I have met many people who were highly capable. They had intelligence, discipline, and ambition. Yet their careers stalled not because they lacked ability, but because of unseen reactions. One comment made them withdraw. One disagreement triggered a harsh response. One feeling of being judged pushed them into rushed decisions. None of them intended to ruin their own path. They simply did not realize that the subconscious was steering them in those moments. I say this to you with complete sincerity. Outer success is rarely destroyed by one major mistake. It is usually worn down by small, repeated reactions. Each time you let emotion lead the way, the subconscious records this as a way of living. Then it continues to recreate matching circumstances, not to punish you, but because it is always loyal to what you have taught it. I have witnessed deep change happen through one very quiet decision. The decision not to react immediately, not to prove anything to others, but to protect the integrity of your inner state. When you do not react right away, you send a powerful message to the subconscious. You are saying that you are safe, that you do not need to rush in order to survive, that you have the right to choose. This is especially important in work and career. When you react from fear, your vision narrows. When you react from anger, you lose wisdom. But when you choose to pause, even for a few breaths, deeper intelligence has room to appear. I have seen negotiations saved simply because one person did not react as usual. I have seen professional relationships rise to a new level because someone chose silence instead of self-defense. I am not saying that you must accept everything or allow others to cross your boundaries. Not reacting does not mean weakness. Not reacting is the strength of someone who knows who they are. When you do not react immediately, you do not lose your voice. You are simply choosing a better timing and a wiser way. And that choice is a sign of inner maturity. I want you to recognize that each time you do not react from the old habit, even while emotion is still present, you are creating a new imprint in the subconscious. A very gentle imprint, yet a lasting one. An imprint of calm. An imprint of self-mastery. Over time, these imprints become the default path. One day you will notice that you respond differently without effort. If you are listening now and feel that something is touching you, I want to invite you to do one very small thing. Not for me, but for yourself. Leave a sign that you are present here. You can comment a simple sentence, such as "I am ready to change," or you can simply comment the number 1. Not to prove anything to anyone, but to let your subconscious register that you have made a new choice. And I want to ask you one gentle question. If you learned how not to react in one important moment each day, what do you think would change first in your life? Your work, your relationships, or the way you feel inside yourself? Thank you for staying with this question. Thank you for your presence, even if it is only through a very short comment. I want you to know that every step you are taking matters. The subconscious is listening. Your inner life is shifting. And the deepest changes always begin in this quiet way. Very few people realize that the relationships in their lives are not destroyed by big events, but by very small moments that never get healed. A frown, an impatient reply, a silence filled with irritation. These things accumulate quietly, day after day, until distance appears and no one remembers exactly when it began. I have listened to many stories about marriage, family, friendship, and even relationships that were once very beautiful. When I look deeply at the root, I rarely see a lack of love. What I often see is a lack of presence in moments when emotions rise. People love each other, but that to one another from old fear, from unhealed wounds, from unconscious beliefs that they must protect themselves, must win, must prove something. When emotion erupts in a relationship, the subconscious often does not see the person standing in front of you. It sees memory. It sees times you were not heard in the past. It sees moments you were hurt before. Then it reacts to that memory, not to the present. This is why sometimes you are surprised by your own reaction. You know the other person did not intend to hurt you yet. The emotion rises very strongly. Each time you react this way, even through tone of voice or a look, the other person's subconscious also learns something. It learns that this is not a safe place. It learns that defense is needed. Then two subconscious minds begin to speak to each other through fear instead of presence and love. Neither person intends to hurt the other, but both are being guided by old programs. I want you to look at this with gentleness. When a relationship becomes tense, it is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that something inside is asking to be heard. And the first person who can create change is always you. Not by controlling the other, but by mastering your own reaction. When you learn not to react immediately in sensitive moments, you are doing something very deep. You are breaking an unconscious chain that has existed for a long time. You are creating new space in the relationship. That space is not for avoidance, but for truth to appear without being distorted by emotion. I have seen relationships change simply because one person began to do this. They did not argue the moment they felt hurt. They did not respond immediately to words that made them uncomfortable. They allowed themselves to pause to feel and then to choose how to speak from inner calm. At first, this may confuse the other person, but very soon, something else begins to happen. The atmosphere changes. Defensiveness softens. Listening appears. Not reacting does not mean swallowing emotions. On the contrary, it allows emotions to settle enough to be expressed honestly without causing harm. When you speak from calm, your words carry a different energy. They do not attack. They do not demand. They are simply truth spoken with respect, and the other person's subconscious senses this even if they are not aware of it. Many people fear that if they do not react strongly, they will lose their voice. But the opposite is true. When you react from emotion, your voice is often distorted. It is colored by anger, fear, or defense. When you wait and speak from presence, your voice becomes clearer, stronger, and more deeply heard. Relationships are not healed by someone winning an argument. They are healed when at least one person is awake enough not to be pulled into the old loop. When you become that person, you offer the relationship a new chance. Not through theory, but through the way you show up. The subconscious learns very quickly in close relationships. Each time you remain calm in a situation where you used to react, both your subconscious and the other person's subconscious record a new experience. An experience that conflict does not have to lead to harm. An experience that disagreement can still be safe. And these experiences, when repeated, begin to rebuild trust from the inside. You do not need to fix the entire relationship right away. You only need to take responsibility for your part. The part of reaction. The part of choice. The part of presence. When that part changes, the whole dynamic of the relationship begins to shift, sometimes in very unexpected ways. Remember that you do not need to be perfect on this journey. There will be moments when you still react the old way. That does not erase the progress you have made. Each time you notice that you have reacted and return to listening within the subconscious is still learning. It is learning that you are paying attention, and that alone is already a very real form of healing. There is a very subtle wound that many people carry throughout their lives without being able to name it. It is the feeling of losing respect for yourself after each reaction you did not want. No one sees this more clearly than you do. You know you could have spoken differently. You know you could have stayed silent a little longer. You know you could have chosen a gentler path. And this knowing, when repeated many times, begins to create a deep crack in the relationship you have with yourself. Each time you react unconsciously, a part of you feels powerless. Not because the situation was too big, but because you felt carried away by something you could not control. When this happens again and again, a very quiet voice begins to form in the subconscious. It says you are not trustworthy. You are weak. You cannot change. This voice does not shout, but it is there silently shaping how you see yourself and your life. I want you to look at this with honesty and gentleness. Not to dig into the pain, but to free you from a long-held misunderstanding. The shame you feel after reacting is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that inside you lives a very beautiful standard. The standard of someone who wants to live more aware, more kind, and more aligned with their own values. But if you use that shame to blame yourself, you unknowingly deepen the wound. The subconscious does not understand self-blame as motivation. It only feels another threat. And when threatened, it reacts again. The loop continues. This is why the more people try to control themselves, the more they feel out of control. The path to healing the relationship with yourself does not begin with forcing change. It begins with honest, non-judgmental awareness. When you can gently say to yourself that you reacted because you felt unsafe, not because you are a bad person, something important begins to happen. Your body relaxes. Your subconscious listens. And from that place, change becomes possible. I have seen many people regain self-respect not through big achievements, but through very small moments of presence. One time they paused before speaking. One time they chose to leave a situation instead of escalating it. One time they acknowledged their emotion without acting on it. These moments, though unseen by others, hold deep healing power. Each time you do this, you send a new message to the subconscious, a message that you can trust yourself, a message that you are not completely controlled by emotion. And this trust, when accumulated, becomes the foundation of inner peace. You no longer need to prove anything to the outside world because the most important relationship has begun to heal. A quiet freedom appears when you no longer have to run away from yourself after each reaction. You no longer need to justify. You no longer need to punish yourself. You simply return and say that you are learning. And your subconscious, like a loyal servant, responds by supporting you rather than pulling you back into old habits. You need to understand that inner maturity is not measured by never reacting again. It is measured by how quickly you return to yourself after you react. Each time you notice and come back, you shorten the distance between who you were and who you are becoming. Allow yourself to learn this way, without harshness, without urgency, only with attention and patience. Because when you begin to respect yourself, even in imperfect moments, you lay the foundation for very deep change, a change not built on fear but on understanding and love from within. There is a very important moment on this journey that many people often miss. It is the moment they realize they do not need to fight their emotions in order to change their life. Real change begins when you stop seeing emotions as enemies and start seeing them as messages coming from within, not to control you, but to be listened to. Many people have lived for a long time with the belief that peace requires eliminating negative emotions. They try to suppress anger, avoid sadness, and deny fear. But the subconscious is not healed through denial. It only learns to hide deeper. Then, when you no longer have the energy to keep it down, the emotions rise up even stronger than before. The good news is that you do not need to do that anymore. You do not need to fight yourself in order to be free. What the subconscious needs is not control, but safety. When you allow emotions to arise without reacting to them, you create a safe inner environment. And in that environment, the subconscious begins to relax. It slowly releases the defenses it has held for so long. I want you to understand a very important principle. You cannot heal what you refuse to see, but you can heal anything you are brave enough to stay with in presence and without judgment. When a difficult emotion appears, instead of asking how to make it go away, try asking what it is trying to tell you. This question does not make you weaker. It makes you deeper. The subconscious responds strongly to your attitude toward emotions. If you panic when anger appears, the subconscious learns that anger is dangerous. If you feel ashamed when anxiety appears, the subconscious learns that something is wrong with you. But if you can stay with the emotion without judgment, the subconscious learns something completely different. It learns that emotions are not a threat, and when emotions are no longer a threat, the need for strong reaction begins to fade. Many people are surprised to discover that the more they allow emotions to exist in awareness, the faster they dissolve. Not because you force them away, but because you no longer feed them with unconscious reaction. Emotions are like waves. When you stay still and observe, the wave passes on its own. But when you struggle, you only exhaust yourself. This is where the power of non-reaction begins to reveal itself. Not reacting is not passive. It is a very deep state of awareness. You fully feel what is happening, but you do not let it decide your actions for you. You keep your ability to choose. And each time you do this, even for a few seconds, you are gently retraining the subconscious. I have seen many people move beyond old emotional patterns, not through willpower, but through patience. They allow themselves to feel anger without hurting anyone. They allow themselves to feel fear without withdrawing from life. They allow themselves to feel sadness without closing their heart. These permissions, when repeated, become a new foundation for inner life. You do not need to believe that you will always do this perfectly. You only need to trust that each time you stay with an emotion without reacting, you plant a new seed, the seed of inner safety. And when the subconscious feels safe, it naturally reduces extreme reactions. It no longer needs to shout to be noticed. It knows you are listening. A very real peace appears when you are no longer afraid of your own emotions. You begin to sense a different kind of strength, not the strength of controlling the outside world, but the strength of standing steady within. From that steadiness, your choices become clearer, gentler, and more aligned with who you want to become. Allow yourself to practice this in ordinary moments. When you are delayed, when you are misunderstood, when things do not go as you hope. Each of these moments is an opportunity to stay with emotion without reacting. You do not need to be perfect. You only need to be aware. And each time you are aware, your subconscious is learning something new. That you are here. That you are steady enough to feel without being carried away. There is a very fragile moment that carries great weight in everyone's inner life. It is the moment when emotion first rises before reaction has a chance to explode. That moment often lasts only a few seconds, sometimes even less. Yet within that very small space, the direction of an entire inner story is decided. Most of us live our whole lives without noticing this moment because we are used to being pulled away by emotion too quickly. I want you to understand that reaction is not your true nature. Reaction is only a habit repeated by the subconscious to protect you based on old experiences. When a situation happens, the subconscious does not ask whether it is truly dangerous. It only asks whether it resembles a familiar pain from the past. And if the answer is yes, the reaction appears almost immediately. Many people believe they react because of others, because of circumstances, because of pressure. But if you observe deeply enough, you will see that reaction always begins with an inner feeling that has not been cared for. It may be the feeling of being overlooked. It may be the fear of abandonment. It may be the memory of not being protected. When the present touches these emotional layers, the subconscious reacts as if you are back in the past. Not reacting in that moment does not mean ignoring the pain. On the contrary, it is how you return to yourself more deeply. You stop chasing the outer story. You begin to listen to the real story happening inside. That real story is usually not as loud as reaction. It is quiet and easily forgotten. But when it is listened to, it carries healing. I have told many people that every strong reaction is a silent cry for help. Not a cry from the situation, but from a part of you that feels unsafe. When you react, that part is not healed. It is only temporarily satisfied. But when you pause, when you allow emotion to exist without acting on it, that part begins to feel your presence. And that presence has far greater power than any justification or resistance. There is an important question I hope you can carry with you in these moments, not to answer immediately, but to open awareness. The question is, what in this moment truly needs care? When you ask this, you are no longer a victim of emotion. You become the listener, and your subconscious responds very differently when you stand in this role. Instead of tightening, the body begins to soften. Instead of pushing emotion away, you create space for it. And something very gentle happens. When emotion has space, it no longer needs to shout. It begins to settle like a child who is held instead of scolded. This is not just a comforting image. This is how the subconscious truly works. Many people fear that if they do not react, they will lose something. But what they do not see is that every reaction carries a high inner cost. The cost of exhaustion, the cost of self-doubt, the cost of slowly drifting away from yourself. Not reacting does not take away your voice. It helps you speak from a place not ruled by wound. When you allow yourself to stay with emotion for a few more breaths, you begin to see something important. Most of what hurts you is not in the present. It is in how the present touches the past. When you see this, you gain the ability to separate the two. You can care for the past without harming the present. This is a deep step in inner maturity. I have witnessed many people change how they live simply by learning to recognize the moment of activation. Not to avoid it, but to be present. When they felt anger rising, they did not rush to act. When sadness came, they did not rush to hide it. When fear appeared, they did not rush to withdraw. This absence of hurry opened a new path. The subconscious learns through experience. Each time you do not react from the old habit, you offer it new data. Data that you can feel and still be safe. Data that you do not need defense to survive. When this data is repeated, the subconscious slowly changes how it operates. Without force, without struggle, only through consistent presence. I invite you to pause here and ask yourself one honest question. In recent days, which emotion has triggered your fastest reactions? Anger when you are not recognized, anxiety when things feel uncertain, or sadness when you feel unimportant? And if that emotion appears again, could you stay with it for a few more breaths? Thank you for giving time to this question. Thank you for your presence on this journey of listening to yourself. Not everyone is willing to do this, and the fact that you are here already shows something important. Inside you lives a real desire to live differently, to live more deeply, to live more awake. Remember, inner freedom does not come from having no emotions. It comes from no longer being carried away by them without awareness. Each time you notice a reaction before it erupts, you take a steady step on that path. Quietly, without display, but truly. And if today you do only one thing, let it be this. When emotion appears, you stay. You do not abandon yourself. You do not fight yourself. You simply listen. And in that listening, a very deep strength is slowly being formed. I will tell you this very slowly and very honestly, because this is an important turning point in the whole journey. The moment you realize that you do not need to react in order to prove your worth, a very different kind of strength begins to appear inside you. A strength that is quiet, not defensive, not concerned with winning or losing, yet deeply steady. For many years, many people have lived with a silent belief that if they do not react, they will be looked down on. If they do not respond, they will lose. If they do not protect themselves with strong emotion, they will be hurt. This belief rarely comes from the present. It comes from times when you felt small, unprotected, and unheard. And the subconscious learned that strong reaction was the only way to survive. But you are no longer in that time. You are more mature, more aware, and you have more choices now. The issue is that the subconscious is still operating as if you were living in the past. And so it continues to push you to react even when that reaction no longer serves you. Not reacting in these moments is not suppression. It is a deep declaration that you trust your inner worth. I have observed this in many people. When they stop reacting from the need to be recognized, their words carry more weight. When they stop reacting from the fear of being dismissed, their presence becomes more grounded. Not because they speak less, but because when they speak from a place that does not need to prove anything. And the subconscious of those around them can sense this. There is an interesting paradox in inner life. When you no longer need to protect yourself through reaction, you become harder to wound. When you do not rush to explain or justify, others begin to listen to you more deeply. When you do not let emotion pull your words, the truth you speak becomes clearer and more powerful. This does not happen in one day. It is built through very small choices. One time you do not reply immediately to a message that disturbs you. One time you listen fully before responding. One time you choose to step away from an unnecessary argument. Each time your subconscious receives a clear message that you do not need to fight in order to exist. And from there, a new layer of peace begins to form. I want you to understand that not reacting does not mean losing your boundaries. On the contrary, your boundaries become clearer. When you do not react from emotion, you can say no without anger. You can set limits without attacking. You can protect your values without harming anyone. This is the sign of an inner strength that has matured. In the moment you choose not to react, you are moving from living in the past into living in the present. You are telling your subconscious that this present moment is safe enough for you to choose differently. And each time you do this, you are rewriting your inner story. No longer the story of someone who must defend themselves to survive, but the story of someone who is steady enough to be present. I invite you to pause for a moment and ask yourself this. In recent situations, was there a moment when you reacted only because you feared being judged, misunderstood, or losing value in the eyes of others? And if you could return to that moment with the presence you have now, how would you choose to respond? Stay with this question in silence. There is no need for an immediate answer. Simply allow your subconscious to hear that you are asking a new question. And every new question, when listened to long enough, opens a new path. I want you to understand a very important truth that very few people state clearly. Not reacting is not just a social skill. It is a trained inner state. And that state is not formed through understanding ideas, but through how you treat yourself each day, especially in moments when no one is watching. Many people believe they will learn calmness only in big situations, but the truth is the opposite. How you respond in very small, ordinary moments is where the subconscious is trained. When you are running late, when a careless word makes you uncomfortable, when a small thing does not go as expected, it is there that the foundation of self-control is either built or slowly worn away. The subconscious does not wait for crisis to learn. It learns from repetition. If every day you allow yourself to react harshly to small things, the subconscious accepts that as a normal way of living. But if every day you practice pausing even for a few seconds, the subconscious begins to learn a new language. The language of slowness. The language of inner safety. I have met many people who say they only lose control when pressure becomes too great. But when we look closely, pressure is only the final drop. The cup has been full for a long time from small reactions that were never noticed. Each time you ignore your feelings, each time you force yourself to be strong, each time you swallow something that was never listened to, the subconscious records it, and one day it reacts for you. Not reacting does not mean you no longer have emotions. It means you no longer abandon your emotions. When you allow emotions to be present without acting on them, you teach the subconscious that you are a safe place. And when the subconscious feels safe, it no longer needs to create extreme reactions to get attention. A very subtle change begins to happen when you practice this long enough. You notice that you are no longer as exhausted as before, not because life becomes easier, but because you stop creating extra burden through unconscious reaction. You begin to save a great amount of inner energy, and that energy returns to nourish your clarity, patience, and presence. I want you to pay special attention to one thing. How you speak to yourself after each reaction matters as much as the reaction itself. If after losing calm you blame and judge yourself, the subconscious learns that mistakes are dangerous, and it will react more strongly next time to avoid that shame. But if after reacting you return to observation and learning, the subconscious learns that mistakes are part of growth, and change becomes much gentler. Many people want to change quickly. They want to become calm immediately. But the subconscious does not move at the speed of willpower. It moves at the rhythm of repetition and safety. Each time you choose not to react, even while still trembling inside, you place a new brick in your inner foundation. And this foundation does not collapse in strong winds because it is built from within. I have seen people who were once very reactive become calm, not because they suppressed better, but because they understood themselves more deeply. They know when to pause. They know which emotions are speaking from the past, and they no longer confuse the present with old memory. This distinction brings great freedom. Not freedom to avoid life, but freedom to live fully without being carried away. Not reacting is also an act of trust. Trust that you do not need to control everything to be safe. Trust that you can stay with uncertainty without collapsing. Trust that your value does not depend on how fast or how strongly you react, but on how you are present with yourself. And each time you choose not to react, you strengthen this trust deeper in the subconscious. I want you to observe something very practical in your own life. When you react immediately, does it truly bring the result you hope for? Or does it only bring brief release, followed by lasting exhaustion? And when you do not react, when you allow yourself to slow down, what happens inside you? Many people are surprised to find that they lose nothing. Instead, they preserve a great deal. If you are listening this far, I want to invite you to do one small but meaningful thing. Leave a sign for yourself that you are present on this journey. You can comment a simple sentence, such as "I am ready to change," or simply comment the number 1. Not for me to know, but for your subconscious to register that you have chosen awareness instead of unconscious reaction. And I want to ask you one honest question. In recent situations, who or what do you react to the fastest? A loved one, work pressure, or your own expectations of yourself? If you could bring more presence into that situation, what do you think would change first? Thank you for being here. Thank you for giving yourself the chance to look deeper instead of reacting faster. The path you are walking is quiet, not dramatic, but it is real. And that truth will slowly shape a new version of you, a version no longer pulled by emotion, but able to listen, choose, and live from a steady place within. There is a very quiet truth that you only begin to feel when you go deep enough on this journey. When you no longer react, the way you used to the outer world also begins to respond to you differently, not because you control others, but because the energy you carry has changed. And the subconscious of those around you is far more sensitive than you may think. When you react from tension, you send out tension. When you react from defense, you invite defense. But when you are present without reacting, you bring something very different. A state of stability, a state of safety. And many conflicts in life are not resolved by logic, but are softened by this state. Many people try to change relationships by changing their words. They look for better phrases, sharper arguments, more skillful ways to express themselves. But they forget that the subconscious does not listen to words first. It feels state. If inside you there is still anger, anxiety, or a need for validation, then no matter how gentle your words sound, the underlying message is insecurity. And that insecurity is quickly mirrored, even if no one speaks it out loud. When you practice not reacting long enough, something very different begins to happen. You no longer need to prove that you are right. You no longer need to protect your image in the eyes of others. You begin to speak less, but each word carries more weight. Not because you become cold, but because you stop speaking from the wound. A great freedom appears when you realize that you do not need to enter every conflict you are invited into. Not every provocation requires a response. Not every misunderstanding needs immediate explanation. And not every emotion needs to be acted out. When you begin to distinguish this, your life energy is released in a powerful way. I have seen people who were once easily pulled into drama arguments, and other people's emotions slowly become very steady. They do not avoid life. They are still present, still listening, still caring. But they are no longer pulled away. And what is interesting is that this is when others begin to respect them more. Not because they demand respect, but because they respect themselves first. Not reacting also helps you see more clearly what truly matters. When you are no longer caught in immediate reaction, you begin to notice repeating patterns in your life. You see which situations trigger you most strongly. You see which relationships awaken the same emotions again and again. And from this clear seeing, wisdom begins to form. Not borrowed wisdom from books, but wisdom born from lived experience. There is something very deep I want you to remember. Each time you do not react, you are not only changing the present, you are changing the future. Because every unconscious reaction creates a chain of consequences, and every conscious non-reaction creates a different chain. A chain of clarity, trust, and wiser choices. Many wrong decisions in life do not come from lack of knowledge, but from a disturbed inner state. When you are anxious, you choose hastily. When you are angry, you choose extremes. When you are afraid, you choose withdrawal or attack. But when you do not react, when you allow your inner state to settle, your decisions begin to come from a deeper place. A place not pushed by pressure. A place with longer vision. I have seen people change the direction of their career simply because they did not react in one important meeting. They listened instead of defending. They asked questions instead of opposing. And from that, a different door opened. Not because they were smarter than others, but because they were steady enough not to be led by emotion. Not reacting does not make you weaker. It makes you harder to manipulate. When you are not easily triggered, others cannot use emotion to control you. When you do not rush to respond, you gain time to see intention, motive, and context. And from that clear seeing, you act with awareness. This is a kind of strength that is rarely spoken of, but extremely important. At first, not reacting may feel empty, because you are used to reacting to fill an inner gap. But if you stay with that emptiness long enough, you will discover something very beautiful. Within that space, there is quiet. And within that quiet, you begin to hear your true voice. Not the voice of fear, not the voice of wound, but the voice of understanding. Your subconscious slowly learns that it does not need to create drama to get your attention. It learns that you are listening even when everything is quiet. And when the subconscious no longer has to shout to be heard, your inner life becomes much lighter. Remember that this journey is not about becoming a completely different person. It is about returning to who you truly are before unconscious reactions took over. A person who can feel deeply without being carried away. A person who can care without losing themselves. A person who chooses instead of reacts. You do not need to do this perfectly. You only need to do it honestly. Each time you notice a reaction rising and choose to pause even once a day, you are quietly but steadily changing the trajectory of your life. A very deep transformation begins to unfold when you have walked the path of non-reaction long enough. It is the moment you realize that peace is no longer something you must search for outside, but a state you carry into every situation. Before, you may have believed that peace comes when things go smoothly, when others understand you, when circumstances support you. Now you begin to see a different truth. Peace appears when you no longer allow circumstances to decide your inner state. Many people live in a state of waiting. They wait for others to change before they can feel lighter. They wait for pressure to ease before they relax. They wait for stability before they slow down. But life rarely offers a perfect, quiet moment like that. And if you keep waiting, you may wait a very long time. Not reacting is how you stop waiting and begin to live from within. When you do not react, you no longer hand over control of your emotions to others. One sentence no longer has the power to shake you. One attitude no longer pulls you into defense. Not because you become numb, but because you have learned how to stand firmly within yourself. You still feel, but you are no longer pushed over. There is something very important to recognize at this stage. Not reacting does not distance you from life. On the contrary, it allows you to touch life more truthfully. When you are not caught in reaction, you begin to notice subtle layers in people and situations. You hear what is not being said. You sense the fear beneath anger. You see the insecurity beneath control. From this clear seeing, compassion naturally arises. Before, when you reacted, you mostly saw the surface. You saw words that hurt. You saw actions that wounded you, and you reacted to that surface. But when you do not react, your view widens. You begin to see the story underneath, not to excuse others, but to stop hurting yourself with rushed conclusions. True inner maturity is not about always being right. It is the ability to feel safe without needing to be right. When you do not react, you allow many possibilities to exist at once. You allow others to have different perspectives. You allow yourself to not fully understand yet. In that space, learning happens naturally. I have seen many people at this stage begin to change how they make decisions. Before, they decided quickly, often to escape discomfort. They said yes to avoid conflict. They said no to protect themselves. Now, when they do not react, their decisions come from a deeper place. They no longer ask what will make this feeling go away, but what truly aligns with their values. Not reacting reconnects you with intuition in a very clear way. Intuition does not speak when the mind is loud. It speaks when there is enough quiet. This quiet does not come from everything being silent outside, but from you no longer reacting from old habits. In that state, right choices often appear naturally without much analysis. You may notice that you begin to speak less, but live more honestly. You no longer need to explain so much. You no longer need to prove so much. Your presence itself becomes enough. This creates a clear shift in relationships. Those built on drama and reaction may naturally fall away. Those built on respect and listening grow deeper. Not reacting also helps you face yourself more honestly. When you stop using reaction to avoid feelings, you begin to see what still needs healing. It may be an old sadness, a feeling that was never acknowledged, a desire that has been held down for too long. Seeing this is not always comfortable, but it is necessary. You cannot care for what you refuse to see. At this stage, many people begin to feel quiet steadiness. Not loud confidence, but deep self-trust. You know that whatever happens, you can stay with it without falling apart. You are no longer afraid of your emotions. You are no longer afraid of others' reactions. This absence of fear brings a great sense of freedom. I want you to know that this steadiness does not make you rigid. It makes you softer. When you do not react, you listen more deeply. When you are not defensive, you love more fully. When you are not rushed, you are more present. This is a rare kind of strength because it does not try to control anything. There may be moments when you wonder if you have become indifferent, but if you look closely, you will feel the difference. Indifference is not feeling. Non-reaction is feeling very clearly without letting emotion drive action. One closes the heart. The other keeps it open while standing firm. You will know where you are by sensing the life inside you. When you go far enough on this path, you will notice that not reacting is no longer something you try to do. It becomes how you naturally show up. Old reactions may still appear, but they do not stay long. You recognize them sooner. You return to yourself faster. Each time you do this, you strengthen the trust that you are living from awareness, not from old habit. Remember, this journey has no fixed destination. It is not a place you reach, but a way you live. Each day, each moment, you have the chance to choose non-reaction. Not to be perfect, but to be more truthful with yourself. And each time you choose this, you are nourishing an inner life that is deep, steady, and filled with peace from within. There is a very important moment that many people only recognize after they have gone quite far on this path. It is when they clearly see that not reacting does not only change emotions, but changes the entire way they see life. Before, you may have seen life as a series of things happening to you. What others say, what they do, how circumstances unfold, and you react. But when you learn not to react, your role changes. You are no longer the one being pulled along. You become the observer, the chooser, the one who gives direction. This shift is subtle at first. You may not notice it right away, but gradually you will see that you are no longer trapped in old stories. Things that once irritated you for hours now pass quickly. Words that once weighed on you all day no longer feel as heavy. Not because you have become numb, but because you no longer give them the power to define your inner state. There is something very important at this stage. When you do not react, you begin to see clearly what is truly an issue and what is only a temporary emotion. Before, you may have made many decisions simply to escape discomfort. You said yes to avoid conflict. You said no to protect the ego. You withdrew to avoid facing something. Now, when you do not react, you can stay long enough to see what truly needs to be addressed. Many people confuse strong emotion with truth. They believe that if they feel very angry, something must be seriously wrong. If they feel very sad, something must be lost beyond repair. But when you do not react, you begin to see that emotion is only a wave. It comes, it rises, and it passes. Truth is different. Truth is deeper, quieter, and does not require urgency. Not reacting gives you time, and this time is a great gift. In that space, you can listen to many inner layers. You may realize that what you are angry about is not the present words, but a long-standing feeling of not being recognized. What you are sad about may not be the recent event, but an expectation you have carried for a long time. When you see this, your actions begin to change naturally. At this stage, many people begin to change how they communicate. They no longer speak to release emotion. They speak to express truth. These two are very different. When you speak from reaction, your words carry pressure. When you speak from presence, your words carry clarity. Others may not agree with you, but they feel your steadiness, and that steadiness changes the quality of every conversation. Not reacting also helps you see that you do not need to enter every argument to prove you are right. Sometimes silence is not defeat, but a deep act of self-respect. You choose not to react, not because you have nothing to say, but because you know reacting now will not bring what you truly want. This choice comes from wisdom, not fear. I have seen many people at this stage begin to live more slowly but more deeply. They no longer chase constant stimulation. They do not need to respond to everything immediately. Messages can wait. Answers can come later. And strangely, as they slow down, the quality of their life increases. Less tension, less regret, less conflict. Not reacting also allows your boundaries to become clear naturally. You do not need anger to create boundaries. You do not need defense to protect yourself. When you are steady inside, your boundaries reveal themselves. You know when to say yes. You know when to say no. And you say these things without guilt or the need for approval. There may be moments when you feel lonely on this path. Because when you stop reacting as before, some relationships built on drama and strong emotion may change. But if you look closely, you will see that this loneliness is not a loss. It is the space needed for healthier relationships to appear. Relationships that can be with you in quiet, not only in reaction. I want you to pause here and ask yourself one honest question. Recently, was there a situation where you reacted very quickly and later did not feel lighter? And if you could return to that moment with the presence you have now, how would you choose to respond? Would you speak less, more slowly, or perhaps not speak at all? Thank you for staying with this question. Thank you for your presence, even in silence. That presence shows you are truly listening to yourself, and not everyone has the courage to do that. Remember that each time you do not react, you are choosing freedom over old habit. You are choosing wisdom over impulse. And no matter how noisy the outer world may be, inside you are gradually becoming quieter, clearer, and more steady. There is a very quiet yet persistent rule in inner life. Whatever you repeat long enough, the subconscious accepts as truth. When you repeat hurried reactions, the subconscious learns that the world is a place to defend against. When you repeat pausing, observing, and choosing, the subconscious learns that the world is a place that can be trusted. This part speaks about the compounding effect of not reacting, something many people underestimate because they only look at immediate results. At first, not reacting may not feel like a victory. At times, it may even feel like a loss. You do not respond back. You do not argue. You do not prove yourself. And the ego that is used to recognition may feel empty. But it is in this emptiness that a new strength is being built. Like compound interest, it does not impress in the early days, but over time it changes the entire foundation. Each time you do not react to provocation, you send a clear signal to the subconscious that you are safe. Each time you do not let emotion decide your action, you reinforce a new pathway in the mind. These pathways slowly become the main road, and at some point, you no longer need to try not to react. It becomes second nature. The first compounding effect appears in relationships. When you do not react, others begin to adjust how they relate to you. Not because you control them, but because they sense stability. They know they cannot pull you into emotional chaos. This creates a safer space for both sides. Over time, relationships built on drama naturally fade and relationships built on respect remain. The second compounding effect is the quality of decisions. When you do not react, you stop making choices just to soothe temporary feelings. You begin choosing based on long-term values. You do not say yes out of fear of displeasing. You do not say no out of pride. You do not rush to change direction because of a passing disappointment. These choices, little by little, build a very different life. There is something few people notice. When you do not react, the baseline level of tension in your body decreases. You sleep more deeply. Your breathing becomes more natural. The body no longer lives in constant alert. And health, both physical and mental, begins to improve naturally. Not because you add something new, but because you stop doing what causes harm. The third compounding effect is inner reputation. How you see yourself changes. Each time you remain calm, you collect evidence that you can trust yourself. This confidence does not come from outside praise, but from inner experience. You know that whatever happens, you can stay with yourself. And this confidence is very hard to shake. Over time, you will notice you are no longer obsessed with what others think. Not because you do not care, but because you no longer depend on it. When you do not react, you reclaim the right to define your own value. You do not need to adjust yourself with every outside response. You become more consistent, and this consistency creates a deep sense of peace. The fourth compounding effect is clarity. When the mind is no longer driven by constant reaction, it becomes clearer. You see what matters and what does not. You know where to invest your energy. You are no longer scattered by things that do not serve your direction. And this clarity allows you to move forward slowly but steadily. There may be moments when you wonder whether not reacting makes you miss opportunities. The answer is no. In fact, you begin to see opportunities you were previously too restless to notice. Opportunities that do not require force proving or fighting. Opportunities that fit who you truly are. The most important result of this compounding effect is inner peace. Not peace because everything is perfect, but peace because you know you can face whatever arises. You are no longer afraid of your own emotions. You are no longer afraid of others' reactions. You enter a new relationship with life, where you are a conscious participant, not a victim of circumstances. I invite you to take a moment to look back at your recent journey. Perhaps very small, but was there a time you did not react and felt lighter afterward? Was there a time you chose silence, waiting, or speaking more slowly, and the result was better than expected? Those moments are the seeds of great change. Honor these seeds. Do not rush for big results. The subconscious needs time to learn a new way of living. But I can tell you this with certainty. No effort in maintaining presence is ever wasted. Each time you do not react, you are investing in a future that is steadier, quieter, and more free. I want to speak to you as if we are sitting very close together, not as teacher and student, but as two people who have walked far enough to be honest with each other. After everything you have listened to, what matters most is not how much more you understand, but how differently you now feel when you face yourself. After many years of observing and reflecting on the human mind, I came to a very simple truth. Life does not become lighter because circumstances change. Life becomes lighter when you stop fighting it inside, and not reacting is one of the deepest ways to end that silent inner battle. You may have once believed that you had to react quickly to protect yourself, to speak immediately so you would not lose out, to show emotion so others would understand you. But the deeper I go into inner life, the more clearly I see that real strength does not live in reaction. It lives in the ability to stay with yourself without fear. When you do not react, you are not abandoning yourself. You are standing with yourself quietly. I want you to understand this deeply. Not reacting does not mean you become passive or weak. On the contrary, it shows that you are safe enough inside that you no longer need to prove anything. When the subconscious is no longer pulled tight by old reflexes, it shifts into a different state. A state of cooperation. A state of trust. From there, your choices become wiser without strain. In the quiet of not reacting, you begin to hear a very different voice. Not the voice of fear, not the voice of old wounds, but the voice of inner understanding. This voice does not rush you. It simply reminds you that you have time, you have space, and you have the right to choose how you move forward. I have seen many people change their lives not through big decisions, but through very small moments when they chose not to react. They did not send a message while angry. They did not answer before things were clear. They allowed themselves to sleep on a decision. These ordinary moments slowly reshaped their subconscious from a place of constant alert into a place that could rest. You will not become a different person overnight, and you do not need to. What you are becoming is someone less pulled around, less driven by passing emotion, and closer to who you truly are. Each time you do not react, you send a clear message to the subconscious that this present moment is safe enough to live with awareness. If there are moments when you still react, please do not blame yourself. The subconscious took a long time to learn old habits, and it also needs time to learn new ones. What matters is not whether you react, but how quickly you return to presence. Each return softens the relationship you have with yourself and makes it kinder. I want you to hold one final thing as you close this part. Inside you, there is always a place of peace that does not depend on others' words or outer conditions. You do not need to search for it. You only need to pause long enough to remember it is already there. You do not need to react to be acknowledged. You do not need to strain to have value. The simple fact that you can choose how you respond to life is already a deep expression of inner strength. And from that place, a lighter, clearer, and more honest life begins to open naturally.